Alright, welcome back to round 3. Another really exciting match that is yet to be on the TheEndStep camera. A Storm deck, TPS standing for The Perfect Storm, for anyone who's curious, versus Dredge. This is a really exciting matchup for me for multiple reasons. One is I love playing Storm. I've played it in both Vintage and Legacy, although it was a really long time ago when I played it in Vintage. And these are both really explosive matchups. Both of these decks can potentially, well, I don't think this Dredge list is capable of winning on turn 1, but on turn 1 he's certainly capable of crippling your opponent's hand and putting significant threats on the table. And Jesse is absolutely capable of winning on turn 1.
Yeah, Dredge's picked up a bunch of tricks since the last time you played Vintage, but certainly Storm has improved by leaps and bounds. You pick up stuff like Ataxian Probe, which is absolutely insane. The ability to know if Tinker Blightsteel is going to be fast enough, because that's the big question there. Do you Tinker Blightsteel and have a Force of Will and know you're going to win, or do you take a look and see that they have answers and go a completely different route? So Probe not only adds to Storm, but it allows you to take the most optimal line possible. So I would say in this matchup, the Storm deck is a few key cards, main deck, that could really make a difference. Time Twister completely gets rid of the graveyard out of nowhere and draws you a full hand of 7. That is a devastating effect versus Dredge, and if you can do it on the first turn before they get their land drop, then they may draw into a hand with no Bazaar, and you basically just win right there. So we've got a misstep on Brainstorm, those main deck missteps from Caleb being very good here. No matter how this goes, it's good for Caleb. Either he gets a Force of Will out of there, or he stops the Brainstorm effect. The only potential downside is if somehow it creates a lethal Storm on the first turn. Fairly unlikely.
Right. And I mean, it kind of, Mental Misstep kind of counts as 2 Storm when you pay Phyrexian mana to play it, because you take 2 life away for playing it, and it adds 1 Storm to the stack.
Absolutely. So if Jesse's able to follow this up with like Dark Ritual, Lotus, Demonic Tutor, Yogg Will, okay.
Yeah.
You got him. But more likely than not, you're going to stop him from assembling those kind of sick hands by stopping that Brainstorm.
So it looks like Jesse was planning on doing some sort of card advantage play, where he was going to Brainstorm, and I see a Mystical Tutor in his hand, so he could have upkeep Mystical for something like Ancestral to shuffle away the bad cards, and oh, he's taking a Time Walk. I think that's going to go uncontested.
And no
land drop.
No land drop.
Seems like a good reason to Brainstorm end step. You have a shuffle effect and you need to make land drops.
Oh, we see the Underground Sea, though. So we've got a Ponder.
Got to make sure that that's going to be your best land drop this turn. Especially in a deck that plays Tolarian Academy and a lot of artifacts.
Yeah, it's really going to allow him to figure out the best possible line here. Ponder's such a skill tester in Storm, because there are so many cards that are passable, but are they going to be good enough? So it could look fine, another Dark Ritual, that type of thing. But
is it really
figuring out like, is this actually going to be good enough? That's the real test. Or you could always ponder into the nuts, and then you've got your work done for you. But more often than not, it's going to be an interesting decision.
Now, from the other side of the table, seeing your opponent keep the 3 cards is a little daunting.
Yes. Now, Jesse having the Mystical Tutor means there's a chance that he only wanted that top card. For example, he could Mystical for Tinker for the next turn. That would be a line that could potentially be good enough.
Wow.
So Mox Opal, and we've just got 2 cards in hand. I believe one of them is Mystical Tutor.
The other, I think, is Force. Dredging 5. A little bit of action. Got an Icarid that he can use next turn. Got a Bloodghast if he can make a land drop.
Yeah, if he can make a land drop, he's going to be able to do some Cabal Therapying. That's going to force Jesse to Mystical Tutor. Alright, so Caleb's in good shape for next turn. thinking we're probably going to see Mystical Tutor for Time Twister would be my guess.
Oh yeah, I mean, just looking at Jesse's mana position right now, that would put him so far ahead because he'd be able to use the Mana Vault and the Island and Time Twister with a colorless floating and 3 colored mana open and make a land drop. Yeah, I totally agree with you right there. Time Twister probably is the play.
Now this is where the lack of Flamekin Zealot is a little bit daunting.
Right, this is the matchup where you want to be able to win out of nowhere because that's exactly what Jesse is likely to do next turn is just win out of nowhere. Especially now that he knows he has this window. Yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be some Cabal therapies coming up with some zombie generation. But those leftover tokens are likely to not be significant.
Yeah, and he's only going to be able to do 1 Cabal therapy. He's probably going to name, I don't know, Force of Will. Seems like a likely card. Although I'm not sure I'd name that against the Storm deck.
Well, I believe he's got a bridge right at the bottom of the screen there, so he's going to be able to do it twice.
Oh, right.
He's got the token to sack. Now, the interesting thing here will be if Jesse... Oh, it's not a mystical tutor.
No, it's the... Okay.
Oh, no.
So...
This is a very dangerous situation.
Yeah.
So he's going to lose the Cabal therapy, the Cabal ritual on the flashback here, so he's going to need to draw something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not having mystical is a totally different scenario here.
Right.
Now Jesse's hand is absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, he needs to draw something like Yawgmoth's Bargain.
Bargain would be good. Ancestral Recall would be good. Time Twister would be good. Demonic Tutor would be good.
Yeah, he is now in a situation where he needs to draw a bomb off the top, and he does not have the help that we thought he did.
Mm.
So this is very, very different. Was that a land?
A Grim Tutor. Is that going to be enough? Double black.
Yeah, Grim Tutor for Twister is definitely...
So 3 colorless, and he can make double black, probably with Underground Sea and his Jet. And so that's going to leave him with 2 colorless floating, and he can tap his Island to play Twister, and then he'll still have a Rainbow Rock open, and he can make his land drop. 7 cards. Here we go. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, that graveyard isn't quite good enough to go with Yawgmoth's Will. I don't even think he has 7 cards to get the Cabal Ritual, the Threshold. And even still, he really doesn't have that much going on in the graveyard aside from Time Walk and some cantrips.
Right. So, Storm of 1.
Yeah, we'll see if he goes with the Twister. Seems like the only line that could realistically lead to him winning this turn.
Yep. There it is.
Big swing.
Now,
still got the 2 Bazaars.
Right.
You can't.
So if he whiffs
around.
Right, he can't whiff on this Twister.
This is more about drawing 7 than it is disrupting your opponent's graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
Though he still has another turn, no matter what, because Caleb can't kill him with hasty creatures on his turn. So.
Right, it does put him in an interesting position. But you really want to win this turn because even though Caleb can't untap and win, he can untap and wreck your hand.
Absolutely. Now, he used 2 Cabal therapies earlier, correct?
Yeah, and they're both exiled, so... Or is one of them... No, both of them are exiled, so... That's actually less likely to hit, but he does play the main deck Unmask.
Yes.
And he's going to have a full grip.
Yeah, he'll likely have a black card to pitch to Unmask if he draws it. And if he doesn't, then he can always Bazaar into it.
Mm-hmm. But Jesse still hasn't made a land drop, and he has every color mana available to him.
Yeah, I like Jesse's chances here. Let's see where this goes.
Wish I could see these cards a little better.
Sapphire. Keeping us in suspense over here.
Yeah.
On Caleb's side of the board, I don't see any flashes of blue. We'd really be concerned about Mental Misstep for this turn. That would be relevant. Aside from that, there's nothing Caleb can do to interact until this passed back to him.
I think I see a Polluted Delta.
Here we go. tapping for black or blue. Vamp. And there's the misstep. That card has done a ton of work for Caleb.
Yeah.
Now, I've had dredge decks in the past that have been able to run misstep and force of will. Those have been very interesting.
Why did they adjust Jesse's life total?
It may have been because of Vamp by accident.
Yeah. Okay.
So we've got a Storm 4, 5.
So Storm is
Brainstorm. I see a Chain of April in there. There's a Chain of
might
April
have.
that could generate a ton of mana.
Yeah. So
he's going to be able to protect a bomb if he's not able to win right now.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what. That's good news for Jesse.
So far we have Grim Tutor into Time Twister.
Oh, he's not going the route of protecting cards.
Nope. Fetching away the chaff.
So at this point, we've got to think that Jesse is going to be winning this turn.
Misstep. Rainstorm, Sapphire. So Storm is at 6 right now, if I'm counting correctly.
Yeah, I mean, if Jesse's able to cast Tendrils, it will be lethal at this point. He can't get to 16 without playing at least 2 more spells, so even Lotus Tendrils would be lethal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mind's Desire is still a consideration. Gitaxian Probe. Alright, still going for it.
Seems like a good combo with Vamp Tutor, potentially.
So we've got a Bridge and 2 Dredgers, plus a Dark Blast for a third, though it is pretty much impossible that he'd need to be dredging the Dark Blast.
Right.
He'll always be able to discard those, the Golgari Grave Troll and the Stinkweed Imp.
Jesse doing some final math. Just making sure he can really... Is he passing the turn? Yeah. Can't do anything. Well, he knows his opponent doesn't have a discard spell, or didn't at least when he looked. And
yeah, this is very interesting.
Looks like he did draw a Cabal Therapy, I think. Now the nice thing about Cabal Therapy right here is Caleb has to name the right card. He doesn't have any creatures in play. Oh. Yes, he does. So Caleb has a City of Brass in his hand. He can make his land drop, bring his Bloodghast back, and cast the Cabal Therapy. This is actually a pretty savage draw for Caleb.
Yep, we got the draw step. Let's see if he gets any more reinforcements on board. More Cabal Therapies would be good, but he only has 1 left. There it is.
There it is.
So he hit them both. That's the best case scenario. The only thing that could have been better is if he happened to draw Unmask. But that was not going to happen, seeing as how he's going to be dredging so much.
Right.
So that's pretty well optimal. Let's see. The first one, likely to whiff. The second one, going to get the best card in Jesse's hand. Now, if Caleb's familiar enough with the format, he's probably going to name a card like Yawgmoth's Will or Yawgmoth's Bargain or something that could actually beat him. So there's the bargain.
Okay, yep, that's not going to see play. With a Chrome Mox with nothing to pitch. A Juzam Jin, Mana Crypt. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a really nice altar. Yeah, that bargain, that probably would have been my guess. Yawg Will or Yawg Bargain. I would have had to think back on that last as to whether or not it was likely that he could have done it. So I guess he's just going to do that to generate.
He's taking the Mana Crypt too. Oh, just to generate tokens.
Yep, and to potentially cut down on Storm on the other side of the table. It's 1 less Storm.
Right.
And Mana's not so much a concern here, but if he draws Mind's Desire off the top, that Mana Crypt gives him a whole nother card off of that.
Mm-hmm. So what's Jesse hoping to draw into right now? Probably a Demonic Tutor, Yawgmoth's Will.
Yeah, Yogwill would be.
Even Ancestral
Really
Recall would be fine.
Yeah, I mean, Ancestral into Yogwill is
Mm-hmm.
tons of good lines here. Just depends on what he's able to pull off the top of the deck. He does have a lot of the mana out of the deck.
Yeah, he doesn't want to draw a mana source right here. Or a Duress. Does he play Duress or does he play Vault there? Plays Duress. Seems pretty safe.
Let's see what we get. So he's taking a point on his draw step to the Mana Vault. The fun interaction, a lot of people.
Force of Will.
That is about as bad as he could hope for.
Yeah.
That's really not going to do anything for him. Mana Vault damages you during your draw step. So if you have a card like Yawgmoth's Bargain or Necropotence in play, you don't take damage at the beginning of your turn.
Interesting. So how many zombie tokens does he have right now? 4?
Enough.
Yeah, so that's 8 damage plus 6 is 14. Looks like Jesse's dead this turn.
Yeah, so a lot of effort on his side of the table does not get him where he needs to be. He's learned a lot about Caleb's deck and what type of build he's facing, and we'll see how his sideboard hate is able to combat it. Now, the nice thing about TPS is you don't have to rely on your sideboard hate because you can just
win
kill
faster, yeah.
But what we do see is Pithing Needle for Bazaar, and then we have Yixla Jailer and Leyline of the Void. Chain of Vapor probably comes in just to make the deck a little bit faster, and it can also deal with any cards on the other side of the table. Sometimes Dredge players will bring in stuff like Leyline of the Void to shut off other opposing graveyard strategies, and it's nice to be able to get rid of that.
Now, it's interesting that Jesse only plays 3 Leyline of the Void. I mean, I guess he has the ability to cast it, especially with rituals and all the mana acceleration he has in his deck, and he probably doesn't want to see multiples of it ever, so.
Yeah, you don't have 4 Brainstorms, so extra Leylines, and I don't even know if he has a Jason here anymore. Let me check. I get to play against Jesse a lot. He is one of the toughest competitors I get the chance to play against. He is very partial to Jace, but I'm not seeing one in the list right now.
Jesse actually taught me a lot of what I know about Storm. I started off playing Storm in Vintage, and I pretty much just used his list as a guideline, and he helped mentor me, and then moved on to Legacy. But a lot of the principles that he taught me really still applied. He's I guess what you would call a Storm Maven.
Yeah, the Grim Tutor package still in there. One Grim Tutor. That's a slot. Some people have gone up to 2 at times. Right now, I think 1 is really good. Necropotence, Yawgmoth's Bargain, Yawgwill. I mean, it's all the most powerful spells in the format. And he's backing them up with Force of Will now. In the past, he's done stuff like run Defense Grid main deck and just try and shut off his opponent's counterspells. But with the prevalence of cards like Oath of Druids and other very powerful plays, it's good to be able to stop what your opponent's doing as well as be able to make your stuff resolve.
Now, one card that I am not seeing, and maybe I just having trouble reading, I'm not seeing Memory Jar, and he's playing Tinker.
Yeah, he's off of Memory Jar right now. It's not served him well. The last time I played a Storm deck in Vintage and ran Jar, I was very disappointed in it. And the more cards like Force of Will and Duress you're running, the worse it is.
Okay. But I think he probably, for this round, I mean, he's definitely bringing in the 3 Ley Lines and the Jailer, so that's 4 cards. Definitely bringing in a Pithing Needle, so that's 5 at least that are definite. Possibly a Chain of Vapor. I could see him cutting some amount of Duress and Force of Will.
Yeah, Duress definitely goes. The Force of Wills are a consideration.
Maybe even the Tinker Blightsteel package.
Tinker Blightsteel isn't as good versus Dredge as against a lot of decks. He may decide to cut that. It really depends on his play style and his opponent's play style. I would be inclined to cut it versus this type of deck because it's very, very likely that first swing is not going to get there. And that's what you need out of that card. You do need to actually close the door with a single swing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not impossible for them to just generate 6 tokens and block. That's really not hard for them to do.
Probably keeping the Gitaxian probes just for the A, the perfect information, and B, it just draws a card for free and adds to Storm.
Yeah, it's a really good card. I mean, it is a card that's very easy to cut some number of, especially when you're bringing in things that are just much more powerful. Also, Gitaxian Probe it really doesn't have any synergy with the Leyline plan in that, you know, most of the time you think of Gitaxian Probe as just being an extension to your opener. Like, oh, well, I'll get another card in my opening hand. Well, that's not technically true when you talk about a card like Leyline, because there's a huge difference between having Leyline in your opener
Right.
or drawing into it off of that probe.
Absolutely. And Leyline's not like Rest in Peace, where when it hits the table, it exiles graveyards. It only prevents further cards from going into the graveyard. So the longer it takes to hit play, the less likely it is to help seal out the game.
Absolutely, and I think that's why the Jailer's in there. Jailer does exactly what you want it to. And on the upside, it has the potential to increase the clock so you don't have to tendrils as far.
I wonder if Caleb boarded out his Dark Blast in this matchup, not seeing any Dark Confidence, probably expecting Grafdigger's Cage.
Yeah, it's tough with a Dredge player. They really have to either do an all-encompassing sideboard plan and be able to handle everything, or take a gamble and guess on what their opponent's going to bring in based off of the type of deck they're playing. The tough part there is, I mean, he's up a game, so he can afford to gamble. But it's one of those situations where if you feel like your opponent is very likely to be at least as good as you, if not better, then you might be inclined to take that risk. In terms of, if you know you're both going to win 50 out of 100, how do you create that variance where you're more likely to win the matchup?
Right, and in a Dredge deck, you don't want to necessarily overboard, because that lessens your ability to just win right on the spot, unless you're bringing in all trump cards. And with the Dredge sideboard, you're not necessarily bringing in trump cards, you're bringing in reactive spells. So you don't really want to cut down on your deck's ability to function too heavily with the sideboard, but you still want to make sure you have all the relevant answers.
Let's see, does he have a Bazaar over there? Unmask is exactly the type of card you'd want, but...
Now, game 2, do you still mulligan to Bazaar?
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
There's very, very little that could justify not mulling to Bazaar. I mean, the list doesn't run Lotus. It's not like you can, triple Cabal Therapy on the first turn and therapy yourself and get rid of a Grave Troll or something. I mean,
okay.
You really need to get your clock going with Dredge.
Looks like Jesse's keeping his opener. I think I saw a Piling Needle. And that's really going to just put him way over the top if his opponent is sideboarding down to Bazaar. That's how many mulligans his opponent takes is going to be indicative of the amount of card advantage he gets from that Piling Needle. Like, if his opponent mulls down to 4, that's essentially like a 3-for-1.
Yeah, he's just going to have to keep drawing and saying go until he gets to the point where he can discard. And yeah, you're right. The deeper he mulligans, the more damaging that Pithing Needle is.
So now he's going down to 6. I would bet you he took out Serum Powders to bring in answers.
That would be a questionable play in my book. We'll see if that's what he does. We'll certainly be able to tell as he dredges. I'm of the mindset that you really, really need to have your Bazaar. And I would not decrease the probability.
Yeah, and it looks like he's mulliganing according to what you're saying. You just really need that Bazaar. So what is this, 5 or 6? 5. Oh, throwing cards around. Wispmare. Oh, okay, so he did keep it in.
And rightfully so. I mean, that going down, I mean, another set of cards here is really problematic. And
yeah.
With that, I mean, he'd be going to 3 right now instead of 4.
Right.
So he does have the Wispmare in the main deck, and he has 3 more in the sideboard. So he will be able to answer a Leyline. The hardest card for him to answer will be Ixtli Jailer. Pithing Needle, he has the Misstep for, as well as the In-God Tour. So he has a lot of ways of dealing with it, but if it actually hits, stopping Bazaar is just devastating.
Yeah. So it looks like Caleb's going down to 3 cards, I think. So it's very unlikely that he's going to be able to use an Unmask if he has it in his opener. I mean, he would have to reasonably keep Bazaar, Unmask, Black card.
It's a lot to ask.
Well, there's an Unmask.
Now, it is interesting at 3 whether or not it would be worth it to unmask yourself and start the slow dredge. But versus Storm, I think realistically you have to recognize that's not going to be good enough. I mean, they'd have to have a terrible hand or attempt the combo out and fizzle in order for that to even be relevant. I mean, a slow dredge is just not going to get there. So yeah, I think that's incorrect to keep those 3. I really do. I think he would have been able to draw 2 more cards to get the Bazaar. He doesn't have a dredger. I haven't done the math on it, but you could make the argument that at 3, if you have a dredger, your probability of success would be worth it because you're only going to see 2 more cards. So, you know, your chance of drawing the Bazaar and having the dredger compared to drawing Bazaar and not having a dredger, because Bazaar without a dredger doesn't actually get you there either. But I mean, that hand, I don't really know what he could possibly do with it on the draw.
Unmask is going to take. What has he got? A Mox Opal. It's going to take the Chain of Vapor. Is that what that was?
That was a Mind's Desire.
Oh, Mind's Desire.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Jesse's got
Seems correct. Definitely in the advantageous position right now.
Yeah, he's got the Tendrils. It's a matter of time. He just needs to play 9 spells and a Tendrils, or play a Tendrils after a few spells. Yogg will do it again.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of different ways that he can get to that lethal, but he's just building a mana base at this point. This is totally fine.
Yep.
We'll see how aggressive he feels he needs to be.
He's kind of really just gonna Goldfish probably.
Yeah, that Mox Opal is still just a Storm spell at this point, but 1 more artifact and it's turned on. So I think he's contemplating using the Cabal Ritual here to power out maybe a Necro. I can't think of too many cards that he'd really be using at this point.
Yeah, Necropotence would be solid. Oh, Demonic Tutor.
Okay, that works.
Probably gonna get a Ancestral Recall.
Ancestral would be fine. You do have to worry about Misstep potentially.
Right.
Now, does he know that Caleb has the Cabal Therapy there?
No.
Because that creates an interesting game. If you know your opponent has a Cabal Therapy, what do you demonic for? Do you demonic for the best card?
Sorry, probed him.
He probed him and then
Saw Bridge Unmeet Therapy. Just probed him.
Oh, okay.
He exiled the Bridge.
Bridge.
Bridge Unmask Icarid.
Icarid.
Was it
Yeah, it was Icarid. Yeah. So yeah, that would be the card he drew after the probe. Yeah, we'll see where this goes.
So it looks like he's chosen his card. I mean, I think I would go for Ancestral here just to get the ball rolling a little more. It basically puts you ahead by like 2 turns. He can just pass because, well, I don't know if that's necessarily correct because it gives your opponent another chance to draw a Mental Misstep, unless he didn't get Ancestral, which is totally reasonable. Maybe he got Necropotence, like you said. That would also be...
Necro's a little dicey because if that Tendrils gets discarded, then it's exiled.
Oh, right. Oh, he's just going to Tinker here.
Tinker Blightsteel.
Tinker Blightsteel, yep. Totally reasonable.
Shows him the Blightsteel, and moving on. Interesting. So him scooping there... Oh, he didn't have a mana source. I was going to say him scooping there would indicate that there's no chance of him having Chain of Vapor, but he couldn't possibly have the mana and the Chain of Vapor. Even if he draws Bazaar, draw 2, he doesn't run the Sapphire or the Lotus, so he can't.
Right. No chance of casting it.
Yep.
Alright. I mean, I didn't expect Jesse to win with Tinker Blightsteel in this matchup, but he chose to do that because he recognized the situation he was in. He knew mostly what his opponent's hand consisted of, and It was the most direct route to victory that used the least amount of cards.
Yeah, I think it's safe for me to speak for Jesse on this matter, in that Blightsteel is uh, like a concession. Like, you don't actually want to be on the Blightsteel plan. It's so much more fragile than people who don't play Vintage could imagine. I mean, Jace answers it. All the most common cards that you're concerned about answer it. Even though he's indestructible and he's enormous and he kills them in one hit,
Right.
he is really, you play him because you have no better alternatives, and that's all there is to it. There have been times where you were able to run something like Empty the Warrens, and you were so much happier than running Blightsteel because it's so much more resilient. But that's just not the case anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Empty kind of loses to similar types of hate, especially in the shops matchups where you're going to have all kinds of taxes added on to everything you do. And in those situations, you really just want to, like, oh, okay, there's 2 spheres, so I'll just get to 5 mana, I'll tinker, and then I have a win condition. As opposed to like, oh, okay, everything costs 2 more, so my rituals don't actually generate any mana. Even a thresholded Cabal ritual is only going to net me 1. It gets pretty tough.
Yeah, I agree. I just think that Blightsteel is one of those cards that you kind of hold your nose in on. Even though it's fun at first, I mean, somebody that, like, just gets into Vintage, yeah, it's awesome to go like first turn Blightsteel Colossus. But eventually you start to experience the feel bads of, oh, that's cute. How about my first turn Jace?
Yeah.
You can send your friend home, and now I have a Jace on board.
Hurkyl's Recall,
Hurkyl's,
Rebuild, Chain of Vapor.
I mean, how about from the shops matchup where you run out of Blightsteel, and then they copy it with Metamorph,
right,
and then play a Tanglewire, and then kill you with their Blightsteel. I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with that guy. But in that situation, Jesse knew that he was going to be fine. Now, it's interesting that Caleb decided to scoop there, because it does give Jesse the information that there is no Sapphire or Lotus in the deck. Almost certainly, by scooping, you're telling your opponent that there's no chance for that type of play. So knowing your opponent doesn't have Lotus, and it's a valuable piece of information, is it going to change a ton? No, but any little edge can help. And again, that's why I think making your opponent kill you is going to be the right play in a situation like that. Draw your card, see if it helps you. At least give them the illusion that they have outs to Blightsteel, and maybe that will save you a game where they could tinker Blightsteel, but they think to themselves, well, what was he drawing toward last time? Was there something that could have actually gotten him out of that?
Right. So Caleb's mulliganing and Jesse's keeping a pretty spicy looking hand. I see a Black Lotus, a Tinker, a Mox Jet, so I think a Time Walk. I mean, they call it power for a reason.
Yeah, it looks like we're going to see Jesse at least cycle that Time Walk on the first turn, if not just go absolutely ballistic here. One of the downsides of Dredge is the extensive mulliganing. I will say that's a fair criticism of the deck, is you really do have to mulligan a lot with it.
Right. Seems like something that would be less of a drawback on Moto.
Oh, people love it on Moto. And you can't miss your triggers either. That's the other thing. Is when you play Dredge for the first time in a Vintage tournament, you forget like Narcomoeba triggers and Icarid triggers. You'll like play a Cabal Therapy and you'll name a card, not realizing that you have to put the tokens in before you name the card, because the trigger goes on the stack above the therapy. There's so many interactions that it's like, oh, I'll never make that mistake again. So it's a learning curve for sure. What do we got? 6 here. He keeps on 6. We've got the Leyline. Nice, bizarre. I mean, at least it allows him to dig for the answer.
Right.
But yeah, opening on Leyline, that is a scary, scary thing to see when you're playing Dredge. So we're losing the Icarids. Taking a look at the thought process of Caleb here, recognizing Ingot Chewer is not going to answer Leyline, and if Jesse has more hate, he's probably going to lose anyways.
Yeah.
So his number one priority here is get rid of the Leyline. Versus Storm, you're not going to be able to change gears and rely on the beatdown plan of like Blood Gas and Stinkweed Imps and stuff. There's just almost no conceivable way that could ever be fast enough.
So yeah, it looks like Caleb kept a Cabal Therapy, a Stinkweed Imp, and a Mana Source and a Grave Troll, I think.
So that therapy will be good in terms of clearing the way for whatever answer he has for Leyline. I imagine that will be one of the last cards that he'll discard out of that as he digs through with that Bazaar Baghdad.
Right.
He may not have long to do it though, because Jesse has very explosive mana here with the Black Lotus.
I did see a Mox Jet, and is he gonna go for a Time Walk right now? If he does Time Walk here, I question playing the Lotus, because you could save it for Storm Generation on the next turn, but doesn't look like that's what he's doing.
Ooh,
oh, wow, Dark Ritual. Okay.
6 mana.
So
6 mana access here.
Storm of 2. 6 mana gets you Yawgmoth's Bargain, which gets you everything else. Well, yeah, that's it right there. Bargain.
This is the goods.
I mean, Jesse's gonna draw 19 cards, and I don't really see how.
He's got the Twister just in case.
Yeah, why not? He's got a black source in his hand in form of Mox Jet, so he can start another ritual chain.
Yeah.
And what is his opponent just not going to make him play it out? Yeah, I mean, honestly, I can't necessarily say I blame him. 19 cards in a deck that can function off of 1 mana. I mean,
yeah. So he still had the Time Walk in hand, right?
Yeah.
And he had the Jet. So
and he had a Twister was his other card.
What was probably going to happen there is Yawgmoth's Will, Tendrils, or Time Walk Tinker with the Blightsteel. Like, there were a lot of ways that could go.
Yep. Well, that was a pretty exciting round 3. I love Storm. I love watching Storm, and you know, Dredge can be a traditionally bad matchup because they're in general just as fast as you, and if not faster, and they play all the discard.
Yeah, for anybody looking to play Dredge right now, something that I would highly recommend is having a different game plan when you're on the play and when you're on the draw. What I would have liked to see on Caleb's side of the table is Chalice of the Void for being on the play. That would have made all the difference in the world versus Jesse's hand there.
Mm-hmm.
And he may not have been able to get the Chalice of Void in his hand, but when it happens, it sets them back severely, especially against one of your worst matchups in the form of TPS.
Yeah, and he looks like Caleb guessed wrong with his 4 Ingot Chewers. I don't think Jesse played. Well, he did play the Piling Needle, which was a problem, but that was pretty much it.
Yeah, that's the difficult job of the Dredge pilot, is trying to figure out which sideboard hate. And that's why Chain of Vapor is so strong, because it answers virtually all of the permanents that you could be facing.
Yeah. Nature's Claim is a close second because it deals with artifacts and enchantments. But you're right, the Chain of Vapor gives you that window of opportunity, and so you really just only need 1 turn to pull ahead.
Yeah, I mean, answering Blightsteel is relevant. Planeswalkers can be relevant. There's lots of times where you're looking to just get that small window. And it plays very well with Cabal Therapy. Bouncing the permanent and then stripping it from their hand can really turn a game around.
Yep. Alright, well, thanks for watching. That was round 3, and we'll be back for the finals.